Hello, I'm Nima Rajan. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says distancing measures meant to cut the spread of COVID-19 are working, but Canada isn't out of the woods just yet. The Prime Minister says the pandemic remains one of the most serious public health emergencies in history, and until it's under better control, restrictions need to remain in place. He says the country also needs more time to prepare workplaces, schools, and places like nursing homes for flare-ups. As part of that, the PM says millions of surgical masks and hundreds of thousands of face shields will soon be going to provinces that need them. Canada's House of Commons is going virtual. Today's sitting is the first meeting of a special committee struck to somewhat mirror the routine of the House of Commons. With the COVID-19 pandemic still a major concern, MPs voted in favor of taking their business online last week in order to allow the government to be held accountable for its actions during the crisis. A scaled-down parliament will sit on Wednesday inside the chamber, while next week will see one in-person sitting and two virtual sitting days scheduled. One of the first orders of business will be to pass legislation that provides financial support to post-secondary students. Meanwhile, the Conservative Party is expected to press the government on numerous issues during the virtual House of Commons sitting. Conservative leader Andrew Scheer says he's looking for more specifics from Prime Minister Trudeau when it comes to the country's handling of COVID-19. Mr. Scheer is also calling for a plan outlining how the government will support provinces and territories over and above the national guidelines that are currently being developed. 60% of Canadians surveyed believe that when one is developed, a vaccine for COVID-19 should be mandatory. Leger Executive Vice President Christian Bourque said he thought the poll would show much higher support for a mandatory vaccine given the scale and scope of the pandemic. Most people surveyed say they would feel comfortable going back to work and heading to a shopping mall if the government lifts restrictions, but are less comfortable about going to restaurants, bars, and gyms. The Canadian Medical Association is calling for greater government transparency when it comes to the available supply of protective equipment. The push follows a new survey that suggests that most respondents have seen no improvements in the last month. Out of 2,500 doctors surveyed, 42% had seen no change, while 29% felt the supply is now worse. Meanwhile, doctors in Britain, Italy, and Spain have been warned to look out for a rare inflammatory condition in children that is possibly linked to COVID-19. Britain's Pediatric Intensive Care Society says there has been an increase in the number of children with inflammatory problems requiring intensive care in the past 3 weeks. To date, children have been among the least affected group by the coronavirus. Provincial and federal governments say they are ready to help with flooding in northern Alberta as the number of evacuations in Fort McMurray jumps. A mandatory order to leave was issued for the entire lower town site of Fort McMurray late yesterday, including its downtown, adding to other evacuation orders made on the weekend. The hospital remained open, and a bulletin from the municipality said sandbagging was underway to protect it from flooding. Canada's National Police Force wants a digital tool to harvest data from a variety of online sources. The software would allow an RCMP officer to quickly skim data from a person's internet activities, including everything from an emoji posting on Facebook to an illicit firearm purchase on the so-called dark net. Rachel Small, a Toronto activist concerned about mining industry abuses, recently learned that the Mounties compiled a 6-page profile of her after she showed up at a federal leaders debate during the 2015 election campaign. She described the whole affair as kind of creepy and unsettling. Fiat Chrysler had been looking at restarting some of its American plants on Monday, but it has backed off because of potential conflicts with stay-home orders in some states. That likely means the factories of all 3 Detroit automakers will be idled for at least another 2 weeks as they negotiate reopening terms with the United Auto Workers Union. Ford, General Motors, and Fiat Chrysler factories have been closed for more than a month by the COVID-19 pandemic, idling about 150,000 workers. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom is urging that the State Department add India to its list of nations with uniquely poor records on protecting freedom to worship. The bipartisan commission, created in 1998 by Congress to make policy recommendations about global religious freedom, proposed designating India as a country of particular concern in its annual report. The lower ranking for a long-running U.S. ally amounts to the disapproval of India's divisive new citizenship law, which has sparked broad worries about disenfranchisement of Muslims. A new United Nations report says Zimbabwe could sink deeper into hunger as the coronavirus pandemic takes a toll on the country's troubled economy and food supply. The southern African nation has what is called one of the world's top global food crises. The report says more than 4 million rural people are in need of urgent action. Zimbabwe's economy has imploded in the past year, with annual inflation rising to more than 600%. Shortages of cash, gas, clean water, electricity, and staple foods highlight the once prosperous country's problems. Israeli police say a Palestinian teenager stabbed an Israeli woman before being shot and wounded by a bystander. The attack came on Israel's Memorial Day, when the country mourns those killed in wars and militant attacks. Israelis usually mark the occasion by visiting the graves of loved ones, but military cemeteries are closed this year as part of efforts to slow the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. Police say the 62-year-old woman, who was moderately to seriously wounded, and the 19-year-old assailant, who was seriously wounded, was taken to hospital for treatment. They did not identify the attacker. Well, video conferencing sites, online grocery orders, and similar activities have seen a surge as a result of the coronavirus. But the United Nations is warning that extremist groups are using the health crisis to gain a tighter foothold online. And that's a growing problem. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warns that extremists are stepping up social media efforts to spread hatred and recruit young people to their ranks. Secretary Guterres says the extremists can drum up extra support right now because people are spending more time online and are feeling disaffected. Well, $6 million and counting. The star-studded Stronger Together event brought in more than $6 million for Food Banks Canada. The nonprofit organization said it expects donations to reach the $10 million mark by the end of the week. Nearly 100 Canadian artists, activists, actors, and athletes shared their stories of hope and inspiration in a salute to frontline workers. It was the biggest ever multi-platform broadcast and the most watched non-sports Canadian broadcast ever. Well, that'll do it for today's news update. I'm Nima Rajan. Thank you for joining us today, and I'll see you next time.